And I wore almost like my work ethic, my success. That was like my identity. Eventually that breaks. I feel like you break down because you can only hold on to that mask and wear it for so long. My view and relationship with men was so horrible that I was like, okay, well, I'm going to run with the boys. And I thought it was the only way to be successful. And inside I was dying. I was so tired. I had to deal and actually heal with these inner wounds that I never had dealt with. And people always say like, time heals all wounds. And it's like, no, it's what you deal with. Leadership is everything. Like wherever you go, right? It's not just leading a team or leading social media, leading on stage. It's everywhere. Like the stage of life is where we are. And so when I started to heal and change, it started to change my leadership approach. Greatest fulfillment in the world is when you're helping another human. And, you know, I think so often we get so self-focused. And it's like, no, you're the vessel. It's up to you to know who you are and to take care of yourself, but then turn it around and like give it all away. And that's the greatest fulfillment in the world.
Well, welcome back to the show, everybody. You are in for such a special treat today. I have an amazing guest today. She's an entrepreneur, a keynote speaker, global influencer, founder of the Fortify Method, named most influential speaker under 40, host of the Fortify Show. Emily Ford, you are such a force, but in my opinion, you're a force with a huge heart, and that stands out so significantly in today's market. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Christy. I'm honored to be here, and I cannot wait to connect with you.
I know, me too. Long time coming. I have to say, from just following you over the years, literally one of the hardest working people I have ever witnessed. I mean, it's not for show. It's nothing you do is for show. Like, you are such an incredibly hard worker. Can you help us understand, like, where did that come from?
Oh my gosh. I always say I grew up on the farm, but really my grandparents were farmers in the Midwest. And I just always saw them working. And then I was raised by a single mom, and nothing was ever handed to us. And I watched her raise 3 kids by herself, like be able to pay for us to be in sports and put us in camp and all the things. And so, you know, watching my mom, it's, you know, it's always what gets caught, not even what gets taught. And that was just always how I was raised, is work really hard, do more than what's expected, go above and beyond. And that is just what I've always done. I don't really know any other way. I'm the type that like, I will squeeze the lemon, I will make lemonade.
Interesting question. Were your siblings that way too? Like, do your siblings? Because sometimes, right, like some things aren't caught by those of us that were right next to the scene.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, my brother's a pilot, and he served, you know, many different wars, and he's always doing something. Same with my sister. I'm just more of the entrepreneur out of all 3 of us. So with that work ethic and being an entrepreneur, there's like never an end. There's no limits. There's no ceiling, right? So, yeah.
You know, I think one of the things that has always stood out to me about you is that, again, you have a heart, and you're such a powerful woman, but the edges are round, and they're so real. Like, your heart is so real. Where did that part come from?
Oh my gosh.
It's so unique. Like, you know how unique that is? Like, really?
Oh, well, it makes me sad that it's unique, because it's like we should do everything with love, you know, everything. And, you know, I do believe, because I was exposed to a lot when I was really little. I didn't grow up in like the most beautiful circumstance. There was a man who lived with our family who abused my mom. And, you know, a lot of times, because she was working, I had to raise myself. And I always was the girl who would like go to the friend's house, but I would hang out with their parents. And, you know, I just feel like when you've seen a lot, it really makes you have a heart for people. And I think that's like where it all started. And I just realized how gentle the human spirit is. And that we all need love. And also that no matter what you have in this life, you're not going to take it with you when you die. And it's, not to get caught up in like status and treating somebody different because they have something versus someone that maybe doesn't. And it's just understanding the human soul that we should love everyone is just, it's one of my core values.
Which it could have gone the other way, right? I mean, all of that could have hardened you so much where you just cut off any ability to feel for both yourself or other people.
Totally. And there was moments like growing up, especially when I did really well in business in my early 20s, where I masked a lot of things. Like I didn't heal from certain things of my childhood, and I wore almost like my work ethic, my success, that was like my identity, and eventually that breaks. I feel like you break down because you can only hold on to that mask and wear it for so long.
I can personally attest to all of that. And yeah, I spent 15 years in a male-dominated, cutthroat medical device industry. And it was by design. I kept picking the hardest of the hard, and my ego was became very attached to being in a world that nobody could survive in, but I could. But boy, like the shell, it was almost like I was afraid to let myself be penetrated and afraid to feel. Such a beautiful place to be on this other side, to be able to have success and to have that authentic, true success that I can show up as myself every single day, and it's received. And it works. And it works because everything is in alignment.
Can I ask, like, did you have like a breakdown, or was there like a moment? Did something like hard happen where you started to change?
It was probably like over time, but I had gotten divorced. And when I started dating again, the divorce had nothing to do with my career or the way that I was. There was some trauma there that surfaced. And I made a decision once I saw it. And so once I started dating again, I realized I was picking a similar type of person. And not the trauma piece, but the other wiring. I was picking a similar type of person, and swear to God, this is a true story. I heard Tony Robbins talk about rewiring some woman's brain that was like depressed and anxious. And I was like, I think this part of my brain needs to be rewired because I don't know why I'm picking this. I went to Tony Robbins for that reason. But it was like the second or third time I heard him say success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. At that point, it was like God spoke to me at that moment. And then we had to take out a piece of paper and write down all the things that made us feel fulfilled. I didn't even know what the word was. Like, I literally had to Google it. I have an MBA, pre-med, I had to Google fulfillment. And once I realized what that list was, my paths were like this. Like there was no way I was going to get over there. And so once I saw, I couldn't unsee, and I thought, well, shoot, I got to change this. And so that's how the whole thing started. And once you get down on the path, you just get more and more comfortable to be yourself. But I had to leave all of that all together because I couldn't get to here and still be the masculine, strong, all that stuff that I thought I had to be. So I walked away. I was like, okay, let me start here and figure out who I am, what I want to be, how I want to influence. This was 6 years ago when I left. And emerge from this other center in this place where it's like, I don't even remember that person. And that kind of leads me to one of the, and we're going to get into all the brand stuff. I can't wait like in a second, but I read somewhere where you were quoted in a magazine talking about how you shifted your leadership style to be more feminine. I would love, if you don't mind, if you could talk a little bit about what happened for you, why you shifted, what you look like beforehand, what you look, what it is that you do now.
Oh my God. Well, you're like speaking my language because I had a huge, I was going to say encounter, but I had a huge session with Tony Robbins in front of 10,000 people after I spoke on stage. And this was like in Vegas. I was training on social media or crushed it. And then I go sit in the front row VIP section, and all of my peers are like everywhere in this stadium. And he basically comes down and does his like 3-hour spiel at this event. And he ends up calling on me. I did not raise my hand. He had me stand up and he was like, what is something you've royally screwed up on in your life? And I didn't even consciously think, Christy, of what I was saying. It came good, like way deep. And I was like, my relationship with my dad. And I was like, oh my God, I just did that in front of 10,000 people and I can't take it back. And this was like a 45-minute thing with intervention. And at that time, I had been masculine, alpha, power chick, like to an extreme. And that was my sole identity. And what him and I uncovered was I was carrying so much oppression and anger and, hatred towards my dad because he left me when I was born in the hospital because I was supposed to be a boy and I came out a girl. And there was another child my parents had who died under my father's watch. And so it's like I basically grew up with like, your dad doesn't want you. And then I watched my mom get beat up. And then I ended up getting married super young to my high school sweetheart. And that didn't work out. And that was a whole deceitful type of thing. And so my view in relationship with men was so horrible that I was like, okay, well, I'm going to run with the boys. But I actually like started to become like a man in so many ways. And I thought it was the only way to be successful. And inside I was dying. I was so tired. And so after we had this intervention and he has me go call my dad and do the forgiveness and he really helped me reframe my whole thought process and actually trade expectation for appreciation. And I changed my whole inner dialogue. I started on this healing journey and started to really realize when I was single and then met the love of my life now, who's my husband, he tried to love me and care for me, but I was always, drawing my swords. And I'm like, what are you going to do? When are you going to do it? When are you going to hurt me? And through the process of almost losing my best friend, the love of my life, my dream man, I had to deal and actually heal with these inner wounds that I never had dealt with. And people always say like time heals all wounds. And it's like, no, it's what you deal with. Right. And so I started to face that head on and I realized that I had a lot of daddy issues, quote unquote, right? Leadership is everything. Like wherever you go, right? It's not just leading a team or leading social media, leading on stage. It's everywhere. Like the stage of life is where we are. And so when I started to heal and change, it started to change my leadership approach. And even the people and the teams I led and the businesses I led, they were like, you're so much more like gentle, but yet you're still super strong. And, and I really started to embody really who God created me to be.
Thank you for sharing all of that. This is why I only have people like you on my podcast because I love dynamic conversations. I had no idea about any of that. When I saw that in the article, I thought, ooh, I want to ask her about that. Thank you for going there and for sharing all of that because I think that there's a lot of women like you and maybe like me that were in the masculine energy. And so, now like I was in Minnesota at a speaker workshop and it was like, there was so much more to it. But the compliment that kept coming up was like, I've never seen somebody switch between masculine and feminine energy in the same conversation. And I think that when you kind of go down that path, and I don't know if you had it too, it's one of those things like trauma where I'm like, okay, are you educated to have this conversation right now? If not, please don't use the words. Like, don't talk about trauma, trauma-informed, masculine, feminine. But the reality of it is like, I am just who I am. And if I need to prove a point, like I can go there, right? And I can stick up for myself too, but I can come over here as well. And if there's nothing to prove to anybody, if I know who I am and where my center is, then that just happens. There's nothing planned about it. I see the same in you. Do you feel that?
100%. Yeah. Like Even yesterday we were in a big business meeting, and I rise up, and I will get dominant when I need to and stand my ground, but then I'll pull back. And yeah, it's quite powerful when you understand as a woman who you are and how to stand up for yourself, and but how to move with grace and excellence and love, and not to be a dictator and a bulldozer, and not doing it out of this loud, abrasive, I need attention type of thing, but just commanding with your ultimate presence.
Yeah.
I feel like the way you describe that is so beautiful. And I feel like that is what I do very well as well. And I never really thought of it like that.
No, I see
I
it.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just to
But
know
you don't
when
think about it because you don't have to, right? I mean,
it's
now
a vein.
we
Yeah.
can leverage that if we wanted to in certain moments,
Mhm.
and we can teach it, but it's innate in who you are. So it's easy to see
Mhm.
on the outside, but you're just being you, which is so freaking beautiful. So, that authenticity and integrity, as I moved into this coaching, speaking space 6 years ago, I'll tell you that I got stunted a little bit because there's a lot of people speaking about things that don't have the results. There's a lot of,
I mean, I call it poser nation.
and I'm like, whoa, what did I just get into? Right? Like
Yeah.
because I came from this results world where it's like, well, yes, people can politic their way to the top. I totally get that. But at the end of the day, the results are the results, and you can't make up a number. And yes, maybe you got lucky. The market drove it for a year, right? And started pulling, but not like 2 years in a row, 3 years in a row. But this world over here, I sat back for a minute and was like, I don't know if I want to emerge in this market because it's just there's so much out there, and I can't be that. I just have to be my real authentic self. Again, very much drawn to you because you're a no BS person. You have an incredible track record, but it seems to me like truth and authenticity is a piece of your brand. And when we talk about brands, I don't think that a lot of people understand how important a personal brand is, because maybe they're thinking logos or something else, and they just don't understand that the fact that you stand for truth and authenticity and heart-centered leadership, like that's a piece of your brand. So can you talk a little bit about
Mhm.
that?
Oh my gosh. I always share the truth is good enough. And,
Yeah.
we have been taught as a society, I think even with mass marketing, there's so much fabrication and poser nation, and even in the coaching space in some of these events. And there's really good masterminds, but there's also really bad masterminds. And it's a bunch of salespeople running around. And it's like, truth has a sound and in a feeling, and you can feel it. The resonance of truth is so high. And when we fake things, it's off. It's off in our soul. It's off. You can feel it when something's off. And when I first started my branding company, Fortify, and I started working with women, one of the biggest compliments that we get is like, "Oh my gosh, I finally feel like I can breathe." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And they're like, "I feel like this brand is like actually who I am. This is actually what I want to talk about. This is actually represents me in such a beautiful way versus what I was trying to be." We do live in this copy and paste society where it's like, oh my gosh, that's why people's souls feel off, because we're trying to be something we're not. And with personal branding, it's the wave of the future. I mean, right now for my new company, we're hiring all these roles. And the minute I get a resume, what do? I go creep them out on Facebook, on Instagram. I go see who they really are. And, there was a moment I was, gonna get on an interview with someone because she had a great resume. But then I go to Instagram and I see like she's working, dancing on tables, looks like a crazy strip club situation. I don't know what. And I'm like, okay, this is such a disconnect. But to my point, and this is an extreme example, everyone looks to your personal brand, no matter what you do, no matter if you're a CEO, an executive, a stay-at-home mom, doesn't matter. And you are the brand, and you do have the ability online to control the narrative, right? And there's been studies and studies and studies. 76% of people now look to a personal brand before they go to the gynecologist, before they go to the dentist, before they go get their massage, before they get their realtor. It is the wave of the future. And so I am madly, deeply passionate about training people, in particular women, how they can reinvent themselves, but their authentic self, step into a personal brand that doesn't feel draining, but it feels exhilarating and true to one's core and who they really are. And that's what I do. And my belief, and being a truth teller is such a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Because again, it's like, you want to build something that's real, not that's fake. Otherwise, it's never going to last.
So much wisdom there. I always say to be the person that you're not is to waste the person that you are. But I can say that because I was being the person that I was not, and I didn't know it. So I find, I don't know what you find, but I find that there's people that we think we should be like her, or we should be able to do that, or we want that. But then other times we have masks on because it was protection, it was childhood, it was whatever it is. So curious to know of the people that you work with, how many people walk in alignment with who they are versus how many walk out in alignment with who they are. Like you're giving them permission to really be their truthful self. And it's okay if you don't know or you don't want to answer that. But I feel like you're somebody who probably just takes the stress away and allows them to recognize that you can make money and be wildly successful just as who you are. So let's just lay it all down. Let's just lay it all down and let's be us for the very first time. Does that happen?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, what people need is permission.
Yeah.
They almost need another woman to be like, that quirky side of you, or you have the ability to speak on disruption like I've never heard, or, it's wild. Some of the companies we're building, these women have built amazing things.
Mhm.
I'm dealing with like people they're VPs of like billion-dollar companies, but yet they still, when it comes to exposing themselves, they're like, oh gosh, no, I don't know. And they take one step forward, 10 steps back. And so, I find, I would say like 80% of them, what I do is I go through this whole extraction process and I figure out where's the gold. Like, what have you been masking or hiding that is actually going to be your power player? That's going to be the thing that helps you stand out. And so, every mentor needs a mentor, every coach needs a coach, and we all change and evolve. Like if we just think of like you and me, Christy, like how much we both have evolved, even in the past 5 years of our life, it's like you do need to sometimes pause, analyze, kind of go through, "Oh, wow, I have a lot of wisdom in this area now, and you're most powerfully positioned to serve who you once were. So how about we go through a deep session and pull out the gold, and now you feel like, wow, I feel so much more confident to go spread this message because I actually have walked through it." But you do need some counsel. It's hard to just sit at home and go, what am I great at? So it's one of our greatest gifts when we're done with a brand is like seeing our girl go off and step into it and own it and own her gifting, because ultimately we're finding her gifts and we're putting them on display.
We're the hardest to see. I feel like the things that I do for my clients, I need somebody else to do for me. Right? I'm writing their messaging. I'm telling them their greatest gifts. And I'm like, can somebody please point this out for me? Because it's hard. It's hard to do, but also sometimes it's hard to see because the things that you do over and over and over again, you don't realize how much it stands out until there's a third party perspective. Or again, myself as an example, if you were silenced as a child in any way for some of these things, that's still a piece that's there too, right? Like, oh, this is so different. It's not going to land with anybody. And so I still need the validation and the permission from others. And we'll have to have a conversation about brand after this when we have the time. But can you talk a little bit about like, what are the components to a personal brand for those that are listening? What is a personal brand? What goes into it?
First of all, you are the brand. And I always share that, like, no matter it's who we are. It's our essence. It's the way we talk. It's the way we move. It's, then we look at, you know, putting a brand to life, it's putting it on the digital space and having a digital footprint, which, really starts with what is your brand message and what's that message you want to put out into the world? Because as much as, you know, I like to share with people, hey, you can put out content and you can showcase all the different sides of you. At the end of the day, if you do want to make a dent and break through, you do need to have what is your overarching theme? What is that thing you want to be known for? Brene Brown, shame, Simon Sinek, start with why. Martha Stewart started, with teaching people how to cook. Like we need to have some sort of theme, and I can find it in any human being. I do not care. Give me enough time and I will find it. And why you need that is because if a stranger were to fall on your, Instagram page, LinkedIn, wherever, you need to understand from their viewpoint, they're thinking, what's in it for me? Mm-hmm. So if you have a clear, concise message, it's now the gateway to your personal brand. Now from there, I look at, okay, what are the main 3 to 5 topics, content pillars that we could bring into your brand that could flow and make sense to your overarching theme? Now, I'm also a businesswoman. Not everybody who does a personal brand needs to have a business. I recommend just adding value. But if we are talking business, I always make sure at least 2 of those content pillars are funneling back into the ways that we make an income or make a profit. Because it's a lot more fun to put in the work and to create content and to create value if you have a service to it. So there's a lot of strategy that gets involved in that. But what I always make sure is that some of the pillars really, really, really excite your soul. And maybe it's like something with healing, and you're not coaching on healing, but you're just expressing what you've gone through and teaching people how you've healed. You're not monetizing healing by any means, but what I love to do is to create personal brands that are not boring, because you're not boring. They're dynamic. And that way, let's just pretend all I ever talked about on my social media was branding. Well, not everybody's into that. So if I sometimes talk about beauty, because that's one of my content pillars, and skincare, there might be a girl that finds me because she likes a skincare thing I'm talking about, or biohacking in the health bucket. Well, then she might eventually get in real estate and go, oh, Emily does personal branding. Great. I found her because I wanted some skincare, but now I can get on board with the brand. And so I'm always trying to teach people to be dynamic with it. Even, I'm speaking at a real estate conference here next week, and all of them just post houses all day long. And I'm like, nobody cares about the house. I don't care. They want to know, if you're my realtor, who are you? What's your values? What's your energy like, and that is what pulls people in. And so I have a whole method and an approach that I do with people. But then the thing that we're doing at Fortify that I think is a lot different from what you see out there is we match your brand vibe, your essence with the visuals. So we go into this whole deep dive of creating a logo, a brand identity, colors, a mood, all of it. It's deep. And what it does is it really helps you attract your ideal avatar, and we match it with your personality. So it's like one of the best compliments we get is, you saw me. This is really who I am. This is really who I am. And it's a great representation of who I am. And so we help make it all cohesive. So that way, you've got 5 to 10 seconds when someone lands on your page, they're immediately drawn in because things look sharp, you stand out. And, I really teach people to treat themselves like a brand if you want to get paid like a real brand would. There's a lot there.
Well, there is a lot there, but this is not simple, right? I mean, your brand, like you said, this is your essence, and this is your business card, so to speak. This is a stamp and time of who you are, no matter which account you go to, website, etc. And it needs to be the essence of the person. And if you're finding it for them for the first time, I would imagine that may be a lengthy process. Or do you see it pretty quickly? Yeah.
Well, I go deep fast. I'm one of those, I'm not talking about the weather, and so really, and
Well, you know
when
what you're
you're,
looking for too, right? Like you do.
yeah, and we've curated a really great system in being in business and transformation for over a decade. I have that ability to match transformation, personal transformation with business and brand. And I can take people there faster because 80% of this is psychology, and it's their belief system of what they think about personal branding or themselves or whatever. And so we go through this process with them. We go deep real fast, and then we take them through and then to our design call, and then they get the opportunity to come to me and do a VIP day with our team, and that's a whole thing. But yeah, we've got it pretty dialed, and it's like I tell people, like, buckle up because I'm not going to let you off the hook. Like we are all in now.
I love that. And I'm sure they're ready, right? It's an investment. I'm sure once they get to that point, they're really ready to be seen and get out of their own way. So, if you were to think back to building your brand, and as you've transitioned and as you evolved and you continue to evolve, what are the biggest challenges that you faced in developing and evolving with your own brand?
Yeah, I think one of the first things was my identity was solely in my first company I built. So I was one of the top leaders in the world in a huge health and wellness company. And I started when I was 23, and I built to be the youngest millionaire in my company by the time I was 26. And like that was legit my identity. And when God said it's time to move and I want you to step out and step up and I want you to do new things, and I kept hearing that, and I knew I needed to do that. It was like, okay, how do I pivot without creating all this brand confusion? And what I started to do was strategically just add in new pillars, and I slowly started to transition into new endeavors instead of just doing what Jaguar recently did and just do a whole rebrand in
Ouch.
one night and ruin their brand. I was like, no, we're just going to slowly, migrate over to being now a speaker and to doing a coaching program and different things like that. And so it was like a slow fade process. But at first it was scary because it's like people were like, are you not doing this anymore? What's going on? I built a whole brand doing this one thing. And so I pivoted and I made one of my content pillars being all about evolving, and we're not meant to stay the same, and the old me dying, and like all this stuff at that time of my life. And people really got the message. I would say another difficult time, and I'm just being the reals, what you're always going to get, is when I went through a divorce when I was really young, and it was public. And because I have such a open, authentic, personal brand, it was like, why are all these random strangers on the internet like asking me personal questions? It's like, well, you did kind of let them into your life, and so I that really was so hard because I always tell people, if you're in the thick of something, privately deal with it until you've healed and you can speak of it. Because when we're in the thick of something, one day we're crying, the next day we're pissed, the next day we're suing. We don't know. It's bad. You're vulnerable. And so what I, really learned from that process was how to elegantly let people know that I'm changing and evolving, and that the old relationship has now passed, right? And I had to really learn how to do that in an artful, tactful way. And that was difficult. It was so difficult because I was also trying to like process all of it as a young girl. I mean, this was many years ago. So I'd say those types of things. And then I would say the third thing that it's difficult and can be difficult is content, right? And I know like you're so good at posting content, Christy, but like I find that sometimes I'm like, I just want to be present in my day-to-day life. And then I'm like, no, but I need to post today. So I had to really find what worked for me and what healthy pressure do I want to put on myself in terms of how many posts I do and all that kind of stuff. And I had to really figure that out because it's like I need to be present in other areas of business. I can't be online but at the same time I'm a creative. And so figuring out a good rhythm and then batch content, putting it together, that like saved me so much.
You are an old soul.
Yeah.
Like just going through what you went through in your 20s, and I went through a divorce at 34. I'm 44 now. Like, that's a lot of wisdom to tell people not to don't do anything while you're in the thick of it. It's holy cow, that being happy 1 minute and pissed the next and suing the next. And it's people go, what in the world's going on? But that's a hard balance to strike, to have the personal life and be present, as well as know that that's where the majority of your clients. That's the beautiful thing about social media, is it's free and we can reach so many freaking people. But the hard part is it's always there and it's never ending, never ending. Do you think that batching content is easier when you have your brand figured out?
100%. Like I have in my little closet room over here, all of my content pillars, my sub pillars. So when I, have a block, or even just when I prep for the week, I just go into my closet, I stare at my giant Post-it note, and then I'm like, okay, that's a good idea. Yep, I've been loving that product. I can make a carousel of that. I plan out my podcast, and it's 1,000 times easier. I honestly, if I didn't have that, it would just be so random.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, clarity, I think, is one of the things that I find with most people is they just don't have it. They don't know A, who they are, B, what they want in this season of life. And if we don't have that GPS, how in the world can we A, reach it, but then B, make life easy and start to hire the right people, batch the content, all the things. Do you ever worry about being copied?
No, because it's like, you can copy me, but your paste won't be the same. We were just in a meeting about this yesterday, not about being copied per se, but just one of my sales guys was like, they're getting Emily, it's like, you can't replace, what, and listen, someone could rip off my book, rip off my program, but again, it's the essence isn't there because, you're not me. And, but I also, like, I'm not a gatekeeper, and I believe in abundance, and I believe in, there can be more than one female speaker. In fact, there needs to be millions more, right? Like, I just don't live in that space of who's going to copy me,
One of the many reasons why I really love and adore you. And you're speaking at the Success Unleashed Summit in January, and I was just doing some copy for that. And, somebody was asking like, why, one of the sponsors that's coming on board, why did you do this? Like, why do you want to do this? And I remember, I grew up in a one-stop light town too. And so, small town USA in Ohio. And I always knew that I was meant for more, but I didn't know the value of mentorship. I didn't know. So I had this gut pull to go, and I wanted this drive for financial freedom. But when I look at these little sprints that really got me forward, it was mentorship. It was the people that would actually tell me what in the world is going on and what it looks like, because I was so freaking hungry. But in medical device sales, in that industry, we were all competing against each other. So whatever somebody would say was so not the truth, because they weren't on their boat all last week. They were like working their butts off 80 hours a week to make it work. And so I had these little sprints where I would find mentors that would tell the truth and help. but it was hard to find that. And so when I always told myself, if I ever have any bit of a platform, I want to tell people what it really looks like, because it's not pretty every day, you know. And I started out here, but somehow after 96 tries, this is the angle that actually worked, right? And have those relative stories, but also bring together other people like you that just tell the truth, that aren't gatekeepers. Because the reality of it is, the amount of people that are actually going to pick it up and do it is going to be a small number, but they're out there and they're looking for it and they're hungry. And if we can get to them and show them how important it is to do it their way, right? Take the message, but with your essence, like that is how it's going to be not only financially successful, but you can make money, but you can make money and feel like yourself, and not feel not feel the friction inside. Like I just don't feel like me. And what a beautiful place it is to be able to do it that way.
Oh my gosh, 100%. And I'm a faith-based woman, and like that's what God wants for us. Like he wants us to live in joy, and he wants us to be in service to other people. And the greatest fulfillment in the world is when you're helping another human. And, you know, I think so often we get so self focused, and it's like, no, you're the vessel. It's up to you to know who you are and to take care of yourself, but then turn it around and like give it all away. And that's the greatest fulfillment in the world. Like you would think I won the lottery, or I'm like on some kind of crazy high after I go serve people, or even after this call, because it's like I know that I'm giving it away, and that's what we're supposed to do. It's such a different energy. One of the last episodes I did on my podcast, I titled it The Messy Middle. And I can talk about this on your event as well. But, you know, I talked about how I built one company, and then it was like 3 years of I'm still doing stuff, but it wasn't it.
Yep.
And I was having to like try the next thing and try the next, and you just know, right?
Freaking hard, right? It's freaking
hard.
But you
And
know, you're like, oh, it's not it.
Yeah. And you just know, and you just energetically, I just know. And you know, I talked in detail about what the messy middle looks like and how that is the refining process. And that's, you know, something is being birthed, but this can take years sometimes. And nobody ever really talks about that part though. You know, you hear like, I started this company and then I went from 0 to 60 and then I sold the company. But it's like, but what about the in between when you're trying to discover what's the next thing that I want to sink my teeth into, and what does that look like? And that's just the reality of life. Like, you know, so often if you read our autobiographies or anything from great legends, there was periods that the chapters are not very long. It's like, and then she had kids, and then 10 years later she started this, and it's like you don't really there's nothing. People think there's nothing there, but there's everything is there, because that's when, you know, we're trying things out. We have to try some things on to figure out we don't like how it looks, you know, and it's okay. And if I didn't try on some other things, I wouldn't know how good my new company Fortify looks and feels. And so I just want to share that impart that on with your viewers, is like, I just feel like the best thing you can do is freaking try because that's the only way you're going to know.
There's so much perfection. There's so much wiring for perfection. And corporate America is a big piece of that too. But just in general, it's there, but we're wired for perfection, and we don't realize that this is what entrepreneurship looks like. It's not like you figure it out and this is where you stay. Like, this is it. You're going to have to try a lot of things on for size. But I want you to speak back to personal brand for a second, like all the employees out there. So we had like the great resignation, right? When COVID hit, and you think about all the people that pivoted or like so badly wanted to pivot into things, and how many people didn't have a personal brand. So can you speak to like that employee right now who may be thinking there's something else or another chapter, and may not even have that? Like, why does that person need to start to have a personal brand?
Oh my gosh. I am working with someone very major with Lifetime Fitness, the enterprise, if you ever go to the Lifetime Fitness gym, and they're a corporate person that has been there a long time, and we're doing her personal brand. And, she came to me and she was like, I can't believe I'm doing this. But she goes, we have all these personal trainers, we have our med spas. And I realized that we need to teach them to build their personal brands, because that's how outside clients are finding them. That's how they can retain. And she goes, I also don't want to be restrictive with them of, you work here, but you can't post your stuff. Like, we're never going to keep talk to your client if we
Finally, somebody gets it.
I know, this woman's amazing. Like, I can't, I'm like, and I go, you're 100% right. You're going to get a great trainer, but the minute he realizes his books are full, he's going to go somewhere else if you tell him he can't build his brand. She came to me because she goes, I teach leadership and it starts with me. And so she goes, I need to build my personal brand, and then we're going to get everybody to do that around here. And I was like, this is so fun to, start to build these corporate women, their brands, because there's so much more to her than even just lifetime. I'm like, dude, you need to speak on disruption. I'm like, you are so amazing. And for any employee out there, like, we don't know how long you're going to be there, and you might love your job, and that's great. Or you might be an entrepreneur or whatever. That's great. But the thing is even if you're a CEO, eventually it might be time to leave. And a lot of people that are starting huge companies, they're looking for great talent. They look online, they look on LinkedIn, they look on Instagram, they look, and somebody that has a way deeper, bigger personal brand. There's more content. If I Google your name, I can find podcast episodes like this. Their likelihood of getting chosen over somebody who never built a digital footprint, I don't know the percentage, but it's real high that the person that someone can actually consume at least 7 to 8 hours of their content, which
Wouldn't even be that.
yeah, someone's going to feel like they know you. And then it's like, and so it's an asset. I tell people, like, do not be a liability and not have a safeguard. This is your asset. You got to have it, because you never know when things are going to shift, and you're never going to stay the same. Like, eventually you might climb up the corporate ladder and, maybe be done, maybe start your own thing. Who knows? Maybe you'll always work for someone else. But the thing is you need that asset. I would never rely on just a company to, feed me for the rest of my life. I just would.
Because you're happy for them at the end of the day. Like, you are literally, I remember when thank you for sharing all of that, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, that, whoever that woman is, tell her I said,
Yeah.
baby, she's got a huge fan over here.
Yeah.
When I was in corporate, I remember the first time, Emily, that I left Johnson & Johnson to go to like this cream of the crop. It was my first disruptive company, Intuitive Surgical, the Da Vinci robot. We totally revolutionized healthcare. $2 million robot, took the surgeon away from the sterile field. He's in the corner operating. The robot's mimicking everything he does. And I felt so bad leaving J&J. And at the time, this is 20 plus years ago, I was an operating room rep. And I remember like going and like, I was like in my car. I didn't want to say goodbye to, to the staff and the people that I worked for and all of my accounts. And I didn't want to call my boss. And it was so freaking easy. I mean, like, they knew that I would still be in their life. I was such a young buck, like 24, 25. And it was like, okay, no problem. Who's your replacement, Christy? Like they knew that they would still see me, but I just thought that my value was so much higher than it really was. And at that moment, I realized, like, I'm just a freaking number. I'm just a number. I could be replaced in a freaking second. And you see some of these, even GE, they eliminate 10% every year, but it's interesting to see who gets eliminated sometimes with these companies, because it's not the low performers, because now you have HR involved, and you can't just eliminate the low performers, because there could be there could be reasons for litigation for doing that as well. Right. So it just becomes like really unfair, to your point, that you could be gone in a second. the strategic direction of that company could change. They could pull a Jaguar and all of a sudden they don't have any customers or business.
I mean, I would fire everybody over there. Yeah. Yeah. You just don't know. New owners could come in and like,
that to somebody else, like your fate and being fed and your future. I believe that we all have, and life changes when we take responsibility for the trajectory of our life. And that doesn't mean you have to quit your job tomorrow, but don't be a victim. And not having a personal brand, to me, and not having, like, that's being a victim. Right? Like, don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't wait until somebody makes a decision for you before you get started. So I could talk to you forever. I want to be very respectful of your time. Where can people find you? I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that want to get started with their brand. Where can they reach out to you or learn more?
Well, Instagram is super fun. It's Emily, ITSEMILY. We have Fortify with a D. So I'm Emily Ford with a D, fortifymybrand.com. Just come hang out and send a DM.
Awesome. I'll put all of this in the show notes for you all too. Emily, thank you so much for being here. I adore you.
Thank you. This is just the start. I feel like you and I are like two peas in a pod.
Yeah, we are. You can't get rid of me now.
I don't want to.
Later. Yay.
Okay, bye.
Bye, everybody.